Israel and Gaza terror factions reportedly agreed to a ceasefire early this morning after a day-long flare-up in violence that saw 104 rockets and mortar shells fired into Israel, according to the IDF. The agreement, reportedly mediated by Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations, went into effect at dawn. Nevertheless, a rocket alert went off near the southern Israeli community of Nir Am shortly after the start of that reported ceasefire. Following an IDF security assessment, it was decided that activity can resume in the Israeli communities on the Gaza border as normal, with no special security measures remaining in place. During the night, the IDF carried out several rounds of airstrikes against Hamas targets, among them a base that housed a weapons production site, a concrete production plant, and a tunnel used by Hamas in southern Gaza. Sirens continued to blare in Israeli communities near the Gaza border overnight after the death of Palestinian Islamic Jihad member Khader Annan after an 86-day hunger strike in an Israeli prison. He was arrested on terror charges and was in detention while awaiting trial. Early on Tuesday, 3 rockets and 1 mortar shell were fired into Israel. In response, IDF tanks struck a Hamas observation post near the border. Later in the day, dozens more rockets and mortar shells were fired from the Gaza enclave, one of which hit a construction site in the city of Sderot, moderately wounding a 25-year-old foreign national and lightly wounding 2 others. The so-called Joint Operations Room, which is made up of various Palestinian terror factions, including Hamas and Islamic Jihad, took responsibility for the rocket attacks. And joining me now in studio is retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, former Deputy Head of Assessment for the Israeli Military Intelligence and former Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Thank you very much for joining me here.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, this ceasefire went into effect at dawn, but a rocket siren still sounded after that. Is that a sort of final show of force from terror cells in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I must admit that the Israeli response was disappointing. It disappointed the people around the Gaza Strip living there, and everybody expected that the answer would be much more severe. The thing is that you could already understand from what has transpired from the government meeting yesterday that Israel did have no intention to escalate the situation with Hamas. The proof is that during this meeting, somebody made sure that the media would be leaked with the information that Israel prepares a huge response to what happened the day before. And this was, in fact, a signal to the Hamas leaders and to the Islamic Jihad to go into the shelters. The proof is that after bombing twice in the 2 rounds of air attacks on Gaza, there's not even 1 wounded Palestinian, not even 1 killed. Everybody was just that only the destruction is only on the equipment and on the installations. That's it.
You say that the response from the IDF was disappointing to you. Why is that?
I think that basically the people are fed up with round after round after round, and they want, I mean, they are even declaring that they are ready to sit in the shelters for more than a once. Just let us finish and go back to a situation where the Israeli deterrence is the one that prevails. The thing is that what's happening is we are conditioned by what Hamas and Islamic Jihad is doing. They want to, they fire. They don't want to, they don't fire. And we have to respond to their demands. And this is impossible for a sovereign state facing, I mean, the terrorist factions. And this is why the situation is as it is. People expected that this government, which is the rightist government, the government, and the most extreme one, that he would handle the situation with Gaza differently. I mean, the promises were we will destroy terrorism, we will annihilate terrorism, and the fact is that the solution is the same. It's always the same, and nothing is changing. It means that we don't have either the resolve to go into Gaza and finish the job, and because of that, our response are only conditioned and limited.
And you spoke about that resolve, but also do we not have the means to go into Gaza at this point?
We do have the means. We do have the military means. After all, I mean, we are the biggest power in the Middle East. I mean, we are facing the guerrilla fighters. I mean, if we wanted to, we could go into Gaza and on a ground attack. But this would demand lots of casualties and death that Israel cannot. I mean, this government cannot accept. No government can accept that. It's not worth it. So So this is why the policy is a policy of containment. The problem is with containment, we contained the Hezbollah in 2006 in the second the Lebanese war, and the result is Hezbollah is with 150,000 rockets. It would be very much the same with Hamas.
Jack, stay with me. I want to bring in our correspondent Pia Stekelbach live in the southern Israeli town of Sderot. Pia, what's the situation where you are? Are residents out back into their regular routine?
Well, Sarah, I would say it is calm, but it is quite tense and somber calm. People here, after a very tense night, many stayed very close to their shelters. We also spoke to residents who told us about their anxiety and their nervousness, especially they said it is difficult for their children. We've just been to schools. Schools are open today and businesses are also about to open as well. There has been the announcement by the regional authorities here that business is basically back to usual today, which can also indicate that Israel is not interested in another round of escalation. But for people, it is not so easy to just go back to the normal routine after having experienced running to the bomb shelter yesterday evening, also in Sderot. Now, there is that ceasefire that is in place since about 4 o'clock in the morning, negotiated between Israel and the Palestinian factions with the help of Qatar, of Egypt, and the United Nations. The question is, Sarah, how credible is that ceasefire? We have seen several rockets coming from the Gaza Strip to the region after that ceasefire was meant to be in place already. The question is, will Israel retaliate? People here are not all happy about that ceasefire, as you might expect that people might be happy that they can go back to their routines and that it is quiet relatively today. But people here are also saying that that would have been the time to really go into Gaza and to react with a stronger force against not only Hamas but also other Palestinian factions. And also the mayor of the city here of Sderot, Alon Davidi, he's also one who criticizes Benjamin Netanyahu and the government for not reacting with all the force, because as you also talked about in studio a few moments ago, this government ran with a promise to fight against what they call Palestinian terrorism, and now this round of escalation might have ended with that ceasefire now. So people here also have been telling us that they're disappointed that the Israelis don't react with more force. But this is a very volatile ceasefire, Sarah. We have also seen a statement coming out from Hamas saying that they in the Joint Operation Room, which is the entity or the conglomerate of Palestinian factions who claim responsibility for the rockets, for the retaliation of the death of a Palestinian prisoner, they're also calling on people in other regions, for example the West Bank, to actively resist. So there's not only that front here in Gaza, the situation here in general is quite tense in the country.
Pia Stekelbach, thank you very much for that update. And still with me in studio is former Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria. Jacques, briefly before we go to break, explain to me a little bit about the reason for, I guess, the catalyst of this latest round of violence.
Well, first of all, we have to understand the personality, the character of our Prime Minister. He's very reserved, very prudent, and he is not the one that would adventure. He's not an adventurer. He has always been that kind of person. Second, the international layout is not in favor of Israel. The relations that we have with America are not as good as they were in the past. I mean, only the day before yesterday, the Minister of Justice criticized America and accused them of being connected with the protests in Israel. So the situation is not is quite bleak from Israel point of view, and we cannot at this juncture we cannot do whatever is needed to be done.